Welcome. Today we've got the Arizona Cardinals 2020 predictions. Here we go. Last season the Cardinals went 5-10-1. That's interesting. I always wonder what it's like to be the team that has a tie in your record because it's got to feel weird. I'm a Bills fan, so I've never had my team tie the entire time I've been alive, so I've got to wonder. It's got to be a weird feeling when you tie. All right, getting into the notes from their 5-10-1 season. The offense is so unique. It definitely gives them an advantage when they go into every week because every opponent has to prepare for something completely different than they normally do. The spread scheme they're running, it helps them out a ton, which you love to see. One of the interesting parts about having the spread scheme is that you're going to think that it's heavily based on the pass, which it is. But the Arizona Cardinals last season, I can't remember my source from this, so I can't have it quoted, but they were the most efficient running team in the NFL last season. Um, and once again, I can't confirm that, but that's something I heard. And it doesn't surprise me because you looked at it and whenever you watch them, it felt like whenever they ran the ball, they could hit big because the opponent wasn't even thinking about the run. And then Edmonds and Drake both played extremely well last season, so it was really logical for them to trade David Johnson this offseason. And also, way to go out and get Kenyon Drake from Miami when no one really saw the need or the want there for you. I really applaud the Cardinals for going out and doing what they think is right, and I think they did do the right thing there. Um, Christian Kirk is a lot faster than I thought he was. I really don't think of him as a speedster, and that is crazy when I was watching him to see how quick he is. Next, still Larry Fitzgerald is still going at his age, and he's still giving it 120%. It's so fun to watch Larry Fitzgerald, and I mean, if you're just watching some random game and click on the Cardinals game and you see Larry Fitzgerald playing well, it's really hard to not put a smile on your face. Besides Christian Kirk and Larry Fitzgerald, even including the tight ends, there's talent, but it's nothing crazy. It's really hard to find anyone besides those two from last season as a really talented pass catcher. Um, they ran one of the most creative fake punts last season I've ever seen, like a double reverse pitchback to the punter who then threw the ball up the sideline. That was amazing. They've got a super underrated secondary. This group that they put together in the secondary is extremely talented and they play really well together. Also, I really like that Kevin Peterson last season wore the number 27 just to look as close to Pat Pete as he possibly could. Next thing I have here is Jordan Hicks is literally a Madden user linebacker in real life. And that's pretty funny. Because not only would you actually, if you were playing as the Cardinals, be very happy to user him, uh, he just actually plays like it. He got 3 interceptions last season. And it was really cool. Kyler Murray running the ball. I I don't know why I'm surprised by this. I'm not really surprised by it, but I never got a chance to look at it before preparing for this video, and he's just really fun to watch run the ball. The naked bootleg he had against Cincinnati gives me the flashbacks to a similar Vic naked bootleg, and it's really cool. And that run was just also really impressive and fun to watch. His deep ball passing is on the money all the time, too. Holy cow. I can't say that I saw a lot of tight windowed throws besides that, but every single deep ball, if he needed to fit it in to a spot, it seemed like it was perfect. Uh, Next thing I have here is the shotgun toss plays need to be used more around the league. The Cardinals utilize it because it's different. Usually when you've got a shotgun formation, you've got a back coming across the formation. So if the back lines up to the right of the quarterback, you expect the run to go left because it's just logical for the quarterback to hand off to the left. But you get that toss play where the back is to the right and the quarterback catches the snap out of the shotgun and just pitches it out quickly to the right on a toss. I think it really catches a lot of defenses off guard, and I really like that play. I mean, it's just more things that are design things that this spread scheme actually helps them out with. I also like that Kyler Murray looks at the matchups or what route he thinks is going to get open rather than just focusing on a single receiver. It really feels like he was just picking the matchup that was right for the situation and going to that guy, which is great to see from a quarterback because you see some forcing sometimes, and I feel like that's almost what happened with Cleveland and Baker Mayfield going to Odell Beckham a little too much last year, and it didn't go terribly well. So I like seeing Kyler Murray go to the matchups. But speaking of Baker, Baker had a good rookie year. And then this second season that Baker had, he gained a receiver in Odell Beckham and then started forcing him the ball. So hopefully Kyler getting DeAndre Hopkins doesn't make him force DeAndre Hopkins the ball all the time. But if there is a player in the league that it would be okay to force some passes to, it's probably DeAndre Hopkins. Also, there's a sprint out. There's a first and goal play on the 3-yard line against Carolina. That's like a sprint out pass where they get like 4 guys going to the right, and then it seems like David Johnson is blocking to Kyler Murray's left in the backfield. But then it looks like it turns into almost a screen pass back to the left way after the sprint out has occurred. And I don't know if that was by design, but like I've been saying, the play design in this offense is so great. Also, Chandler Jones had more than 15 sacks this season. I think it was 19. I don't know exactly. I can't remember exactly. I think it was 19, though. And he's just a monster. He's an amazing part of their defense. The sad thing about their defense this season is that they only accumulated 7 total interceptions. Being a Bills fan, I've seen Nathan Peterman throw 5.5 to one team, so only accumulating 7 INTs all season is kind of scary. Especially when talking about the fact that so many tacklers on their defense had high tackling numbers. I think the one drawback to this offense may be that it's just they get off the field too fast. I mean, whether they're scoring or going 3 and out, they're just coming off the field fast. They had a lot of guys on their defense last season with high tackle numbers, and that's not necessarily good. However, you do have to applaud a safety when a safety reaches 147 tackles in a season. That is insane. So Budda Baker, or if you want to call him a nickel corner, whatever he's playing for them, he's that chess piece that's awesome. You love those kinds of players that you can move all over the field. But 147 tackles for what I would consider a defensive back is an amazing season. That's crazy. Next up, let's talk about their injuries from last season. They had a lot, but I'm going to say that there's only 2 that are real keys. They had a rookie wide receiver in Hakeem Butler get injured, and he missed the entire season, along with the tackle Marcus Gilbert. Now, I don't know if how Hakeem Butler will be, but I figure it's important to put him in a key injury list because they're losing Damiere Byrd and Farrell Cooper in free agency, who both gave them at least decent production last season. And Hakeem Butler may be able to step up this year. Along with Marcus Gilbert, he's a good tackle, and it's important that they get him back. I think he'll definitely help out the offensive line next season. Now, talking about their losses in free agency. So I already mentioned Damiere Byrd and Farrell Cooper. Next, we've got a few linebackers here, Cassius Marsh, Joe Walker, and Zach Kerr. I'm just going to say that they're all meh players. Like, they're not too special and really could be replaced with a lot of guys. Almost all those guys, you just feel like could be replaced. And I'm not sure actually what. I'm pretty sure Zach Kerr's actually a defensive lineman. I may have just lumped him in with the linebackers, so my bad if I did. But once again, the reason I included him in that group is because I'm not really thinking that it's like he he could be easily replaced, is what I'm just saying. Then the last player that they lost that I considered important was Rodney Gunther. He just played really strong in the interior. He was third on the team in tackles for the loss, and I think he also had 3 sacks. So he was pretty good, but with what they acquired, I think they'll be okay with it. Because in the offseason, they required 4 important pieces, being DeAndre Hopkins, quite possibly the best receiver in the league. And I'll just talk about him first. He really, you think about him, and I just think about the stat, I think, not from last season, but the season before that, I think, where he went the entire season without dropping a pass. I don't know how many other guys have done that in history, but I'm guessing one of those guys may also be on this team in Larry Fitzgerald, which is very funny. You've got 2 guys with solid hands, along with Christian Kirk, who's up and coming, and I think he'll be pretty talented. That's a pretty solid starting 3 receivers, but DeAndre Hopkins will be, even though Christian Kirk and Larry Fitzgerald are talented, DeAndre Hopkins will be the best receiver on this team when he gets into the building. And I think with him there, it'll really spread things out and scare some defenses with who they can throw to here. And he can only be looked at as an advantage. And then, okay, now we talked about the linebackers that the Cardinals lost before. Devon Kennard is a linebacker from the Lions that they're gaining. I definitely think that he's an upgrade from any of the guys from before. If not equal. So I think even though they lost those guys, that's okay. Then you got a guy from Atlanta in Devondre Campbell that was a decently high first-round pick a few years ago. And he's more of a pass rusher. That's at least how I think of him. And if he could really get going, then he could really be a good player for them too. But I think the most important free agent acquisition for the Cardinals is from my Buffalo Bills, sadly, because I love this guy, and that's Jordan Phillips. He basically played nose tackle for the Bills all season, and just his size and just quickness off the ball and how much power he would bring just to every play was wonderful. And he's always intense. He's a super high motor player. And it's a guy you're going to love to have on your team. He's going to help out the defensive line a ton. Now, moving on to the draft. The Cardinals may have gotten the steal of the draft with a new age linebacker in Isaiah Simmons that is just absolutely amazing. This guy, I feel like I've talked about him a ton before, and I can't believe he dropped to them. But it's just, you got everything you want with him. You've got the size, the speed, the power. It's amazing. There's not much more you can say about it. That's a steal, and he's another chess piece, just like Budda Baker. Instead of playing a defensive back position, he's a linebacker. And you could even move him to defensive back. He's that talented. He can be all over the field. Next up, they didn't have a second-round pick, so in the third round, they went tackle Josh Jones. I feel like this guy was rated a lot higher, and I'm not sure why he slipped to the third round. So I think that's a good O-line prospect, and I like the pick here. Next up, fourth round, they had 2 fourth-round picks, and they went defensive tackle with both. Now, I think they actually picked Rashard Lawrence second, who is a defensive tackle from LSU, and they picked a guy by the name of Leke Fotu from Utah. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that correct, but I think the second defensive tackle they picked in Lawrence is actually the better player. I looked up a lot of stuff about Fotu, and I really couldn't find anything that was convincing me that he's an extremely talented player. So I could see Lawrence turning into something, though. I'm just not sure what they see in Fotu, so I don't really love that pick. Next up, they didn't have a fifth-round pick, so they picked a linebacker from Cal named Evan Weaver. He's a good tackler, but I didn't see much block shed. He was packing, like I said, he was packing a punch when he was getting to people and making tackles, but most of his highlights, I didn't see much block shed, and it was just if he was unblocked, he was able to make a play. And really, when talking about players, I would value their block shedding abilities more than their tackling abilities, just because if you can't get off a block, how are you ever going to be able to make a tackle in the first place? Now, seventh round pick, a running back from Arizona State by the name of Eno Benjamin, who I had not heard of before this, but I am glad I got to check him out because he's a bit elusive. I would say he's actually a pretty elusive runner, but what I love about him is he plays like he's attacking the defenders. He's the one with the ball trying to avoid them, and he's attacking them. It is so fun to watch. I mean, there's a play where he can easily cross the goal line, but instead he decides to go at the defender that's 2 yards deep into the end zone and run him over just for some extra fun. He was really fun, and not only was he doing that, I mean, it was fun to watch, and he was actually being productive while doing it, which was another important thing. So maybe if they're looking for a guy that's a little more of a power runner, which I guess you could turn him into, even though he's got elements of elusiveness in his game. If they want to try to make him the power back with Edmonds and Drake not being so much of power backs, if they want him for like goal line or something, he could turn into that because that's also what it seemed like he was doing at Arizona State. He was doing a lot of short yardage stuff, and it seemed to work well. So now let's finally get to the part of the video where we start talking about how we think they're going to do this season. Now, I think what I'm going to do here is I'm still just going to go based off their opponents. The schedule is now out, and I think I'll do another video after I complete every team's prediction videos, because I don't like looking at the schedule because then it makes me pick specific games. I'm willing to pick most of these games just by looking at the matchups, but I like to name a few games that I think are toss-up games. And that's easier to do without looking at the schedule and just naming the teams off right here. So with that, for home games, we'll start. They've got their... Well, actually, let's not just start with the home games. Let's talk about their division. Now, they may be in the best division in football, and I think you definitely could say that it's the best division in football. They've got Seattle, San Fran, and the Los Angeles Rams. That's pretty crazy. I mean, I can almost say guaranteed going on the road to almost all three of those places, except maybe LA, is going to be a very challenging game for the Cardinals. And I really like the idea of the Cardinals being a lot better team this year, but wow, it is hard to see them winning a lot of these interdivision games. And with how I called the other teams, with how I think they're going to do in the division, I have to say that all those games on the road they're going to lose. Seattle, San Fran, and LA. And then you still, when they come back home, even against these teams at home, I think they'll be able to keep the games a lot closer against Seattle and San Fran, but I still think they're going to lose. However, I do think they have to take at least one of these. I think they could even take two of them, but more than two is pretty tough, and I'm just going to play it safe and say that they're only going to be able to take one game in their division. Now, don't hate me yet. That means they're starting out 1-5 when just talking about their division. But I do think that they actually have a good chance of winning a lot more, not a lot more, but at least more games than they did last season. Now, who do they play at home? Let's look at the teams that I think they can definitely beat at home this season first. The nice part is they're also playing as they were the fourth place team in their division. They get two extra crappy teams in here. So, they're playing the Washington Redskins at home. That's definitely a game they can win. They're playing the Miami Dolphins at home. That's definitely a game they can win. They're playing the Detroit Lions at home. That's also definitely a game they can win. So that's three more games that they can win already. So that puts them at 4-5 already. Now, here are the two tough games that they're going to be playing at home. Against my Buffalo Bills and against the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I don't think they're going to beat the Bills, so that puts them at 4-6. But I do think they'll be able to beat the Eagles. I don't know how high everybody else is on the Eagles, but I'm not seeing that Philadelphia rosters advance as much. So I think that puts them at 5-6 just after talking about the home games and the division games. But now moving on to the away games that we haven't discussed yet. We've got the New York Giants. I definitely don't think that team's a talented team either. I think this Cardinals team is very talented. Even though they're not as good as the other NFC West teams since it's loaded, they can beat the Giants. And that'll balance the record out. Now we're up to 6-6. They go on the road to Dallas. That'll be a tough one. That will be a tough one. I'll say that they're going to drop to Dallas because Dallas will probably be a pretty scary offense next season, so that puts them at 6-7. But luckily, next two games, we've got the New York Jets and the New England Patriots. Now these teams both may be mediocre, and the Cardinals do have to travel to both of those stadiums, but I like the Cardinals more in both of these cases. Just looking at the offensive weapons versus the Jets, I think they'll be able to outscore the Jets. And looking at New England, I just don't like picking New England. I really can't. I know Belichick is an amazing coach, but I really can't get my mind behind Jarrett Stidham at this point in the season. So I'm going to pick the Cardinals against them too. So that puts them at 8-7. Now they're going to have to go to Carolina. And I think with Teddy Bridgewater being a game manager for the Carolina Panthers, I don't actually want to call Teddy Bridgewater game manager because that's thought of as a negative phrase. I think Teddy Bridgewater is a talented enough quarterback to not be as detrimental to the team as, say, Kyle Allen or any other quarterbacks that were playing last season were to the Panthers. I think Teddy Bridgewater is not going to light up the scoreboard, but I think having Christian McCaffrey on your offense and having a quarterback that can play well, along with the addition of Robbie Anderson, that'll make that offense good enough. I think that's actually one of the games that I would be really interested to watch this season, Carolina and Arizona, just because I actually feel like these are two teams that you could be relatively shocked by with how they play this season. But I say they're going to fall to Carolina there because I'm just going to give the advantage to Carolina because I would probably pick whichever team was the home team for that matchup. And Carolina's got the home matchup. So for this team, I'm going to say the Arizona Cardinals will go 8-8 next season. And that's pretty crazy. If you count, I guess 8-8 is 500, but I would say that 8-8 is a pretty respectable record in the NFL. I mean, and finishing out the NFC West, that means that every team in this division is basically going to have a winning record, if you count 500 as a winning record. I would say it is, just because in this case, talking about NFL teams, you're going to want to act like a glass half full kind of guy. So, I mean, for my predictions, NFC West, I'm going to say every team is going to have a winning record in this division. So, 8-8 for the Cardinals. I hope you enjoyed the video.